At Chengdu Aircraft Industry Group Plant 132, a complex of buildings has grown by roughly 3 million square feet in less than 3 years. With affiliated facilities, the total footprint exceeds 8 million square feet. The Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies has publicly assessed that this single Chinese site is now larger than the entire Lockheed Martin F-35 complex in Fort Worth, Texas. Inside it, 5 active pulse production lines are turning out between 100 and 120 J-20 stealth fighters every year. As of April 2026, the operational fleet has crossed 330 airframes. The Royal United Services Institute and the Mitchell Institute project that the People's Liberation Army Air Force will field roughly 1,000 J-20s by the early 2030s. But the real story is not the head count. The real story is that China is doing something no other country has attempted at scale. It is taking the 4th-generation logic of mass and applying it to a 5th-generation airframe. Welcome back to the channel. What follows comes straight from satellite imagery of Plant 132, public Mitchell Institute and RUSI assessments, the September 2025 Beijing parade footage, and the post-action analysis of Operation Sindhur recovered missile wreckage. By the time this video ends, you will know exactly what 1,000 J-20s buys China in a Pacific fight, the 4 structural taxes that could still break that bet, and the American counter-architecture moving into Kadena and Misawa to meet it. Start with what is verified. By April 2026, Western intelligence consensus places the J-20 fleet at 330 to 350 airframes. That figure decisively surpasses the official United States Air Force F-22 Raptor inventory, which stands at 183 total airframes, of which only about 143 are combat-coded. Output has accelerated from 70 to 80 units in mid-2024 to 100 to 120 units across 2025 and 2026. The entire global F-35 program produces roughly 156 airframes per year across dozens of partner nations. China's 120 are dedicated to one force in one theater. 330 airframes today, plus 120 per year, gets you to roughly 1,050 by 2032. The 1,000 jet projection is arithmetic, validated by satellite imagery. The basing geography compounds the math. The PLAAF has now distributed J-20 brigades across all 4 theater commands. The forward ring base at Wuyishan in Fujian sits roughly 500 kilometers from Taipei. Changxing Air Base in Zhejiang is 680 kilometers out. Wuhu Air Base in Anhui, home of the elite 9th Fighter Brigade, is 770. Foshanshadi in Guangdong protects the southern flank. The 1st Fighter Brigade at Anshan in the north pressures American and Allied forces in Japan and Korea. And along the Tibetan Plateau, satellite imagery confirms construction or expansion of at least 16 high-altitude air bases capable of hosting J-20 operations. These bases are equipped with hardened aircraft shelters, subterranean fuel and munitions depots, and redundant runways. The fight is no longer notional. The airframe sitting on those flight lines is no longer the original baseline. 2 new variants moved into the open in late 2025. The J-20A is a heavily refined single-seat fighter with a flattened rear canopy, a raised dorsal spine, and the long-awaited domestic WS-15 engine. On January 24, 2026, Chengdu Aircraft Industry Group released imagery confirming a successful flight test of a J-20A on fully domestic WS-15 power. The airframes were photographed in pre-delivery yellow zinc chromate primer, indicating production testing rather than experimental flight. The WS-15 is the engine the program waited 15 years to receive. It generates a reported afterburner thrust around 180 kilonewtons, roughly 40,000 pounds, theoretically exceeding the 35,000 pounds from each Pratt & Whitney F-119 powering the F-22. The J-20 can supercruise at Mach 1.3 to 1.5. The second variant is the J-20S. It is the world's first operational twin-seat stealth fighter. It debuted an arrow-shaped echelon at the September 3, 2025 military parade in Beijing. The official Chinese characterization from military affairs expert Zhang Shuifeng on state television was, quote, "spearhead force for future air combat operations," and, quote, "playmaker. The rear seat operator commands collaborative combat aircraft and stealth attack drones. This is manned-unmanned teaming, embedded inside a stealth fighter in serial production." The Type 1475 AESA radar carries between 1,856 and over 2,000 transmit-receive modules, possibly gallium nitride. Detection range estimates run 250 to 300 kilometers. The aircraft adds an electro-optical targeting system and a distributed aperture system providing 360-degree infrared awareness. The munitions are tiered. The PL-15, the standard beyond visual range round, has a domestic variant range exceeding 200 kilometers. The PL-17, first seen clearly in early 2026 imagery, is roughly 6 meters long, reaches 400 to 500 kilometers, and exceeds Mach 4. It cannot fit inside the J-20 internal bay. It does not need to. The Doctrine is the elegant part. The J-20 operates as a stealthy forward sensor node. It acquires targets and passes telemetry through secure data link to non-stealth J-16S in trail, carrying the heavy PL-17. The shooter never enters the threat ring. The kill chain is hunting the tanker and the airborne warning aircraft, the logistical spine of American expeditionary air power. Beneath the J-20 sit overlapping rings of HQ-9 and HQ-19 surface-to-air missiles. Alongside it, the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force is tasked with using DF-26 and anti-ship DF-21D ballistic missiles to suppress Allied airfields at Kadena, Iwakuni, and Guam. The J-20 does not have to defend its own runway. It is freed to hunt. What the volume buys. The first thing the production curve buys is saturation in the opening 72 hours of any Taiwan contingency. A fleet at Wuyishan and Wuhu can sustain high-tempo sortie generation over the strait without aerial refueling. That establishes an air superiority ceiling under which H-6K bombers and J-16S can move with relative impunity. The second thing it buys is reach. The PLAAF now operates an estimated 16 to 17 Y-20U tankers. A single refueling lets J-20S push through the South China Sea and patrol deep into the Western Pacific, challenging U.S. Navy carrier strike groups operating from Guam. The third thing it buys is parallel naval evolution. Recent footage confirms the carrier-based J-35 has entered service with the People's Liberation Army Navy. Chinese carrier strike groups now have organic fifth-generation air defense, projecting stealth power past the first island chain. The fourth thing it buys is the most quietly destabilizing. The J-20 plus J-16 plus PL-17 architecture creates a 400 to 500 kilometer threat ring aimed at tankers and airborne warning platforms. The PLAAF does not need to win a fighter duel. It needs to blind the network and starve it of fuel. That pushes the carriers eastward and rewrites every basing decision in Japan, the Philippines, and Guam. Now, the friction. The first tax is system integration. A lone J-20 against a fully networked F-22 or F-35 faces severe disadvantages in data fusion and low probability of intercept networking. Chinese simulations have reportedly concluded a single J-20 with medium-range missiles has less than a 10% chance of defeating a fully armed F-22 in a sterile one-on-one fight. The second tax is engine reliability. The WS-15 may match the F-119 in peak thrust. Time on wing is a different question. Western engines run for thousands of hours before deep maintenance. Chinese engines have historically required hot section overhaul after only hundreds. An Air Force grounding its inventory for engine swaps cannot keep 1,000 airframes flying. The third tax was paid in combat. From May 7th to May 10th, 2025, Pakistan and India fought a 4-day air war, Operation Sindhur. Pakistani J-10CE and JF-17. Block 3 fighters launched export variant PL-15E missiles at Indian Rafales. Indian engineers recovered substantially intact wreckage near Hoshiarpur in Punjab. Indian analysts assessed a terminal failure rate approaching 60% against the French-built SPECTRA electronic warfare system. The kinematic performance was not the problem. The seeker's electronic countermeasure resilience against a mature Western EW suite was. A 400-kilometer reach is operationally meaningless if the missile cannot hold a lock in a dense, hostile electromagnetic environment. The fourth tax is institutional. The Air Force and its allies benefit from decades of continuous combat operations and exercises like Red Flag and RE4PAC, which spanned 50 locations and 6,000 miles of the Pacific in 2025. PLAAF pilots have never fought a war. Multi-axis kill chains are a perishable institutional skill. It is not yet present. And the American counter-architecture is moving. F-22 Raptors from the 90th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron and the 27th Fighter Squadron arrived at Kadena Air Base in May 2026, directly opposite the Eastern Theater Command's J-20 brigades. In March and April 2026, the 13th and 14th Fighter Squadrons transitioned to F-35As at Misawa Air Base. The F-47, awarded to Boeing in March 2025, remains on track for first flight in 2028. In April 2026, the Air Force's Experimental Operations Unit at Edwards flew Anduril's YFQ-44 Alpha, the Fury, under Operational Warfighter Command. First-time autonomous wingmen were commanded by line pilots. General Atomics' YFQ-42 Alpha, the Dark Merlin, is on a parallel track. The goal is at least 1,000 armed collaborative combat aircraft. The American answer to 1,000 J-20s is not 1,000 new manned fighters. It is a different shape entirely. On one road, China sustains its production curve, fields the WS-15 across the fleet at scale, hardens the PL-15 Seeker against jamming, generates real institutional combat experience, and arrives at the early 2030s with a deployed, mature, networked 1,000-jet stealth force operating from 16-plus hardened bases inside the first island chain. On that road, Pacific air dominance has structurally moved. On the other road, airframes pile up faster than engines can be sustained. Seekers stay fragile against EW. The Allied network thickens at Kadena and Massawa. The F-47 hits its 2028 first flight, and the 1,000 jet figure becomes a brittle inventory number. None of these risks are fatal. All of them are real. Quantity has a quality of its own. So does engine reliability. The PLAAF has the industrial mass. The United States retains the geometric integration. The decade will decide which one matters more. Before you go, if you want more in-depth analysis of the structural shifts changing Pacific air combat, subscribe. That signal tells the algorithm to keep pushing this kind of long-form reporting in front of viewers who actually want to think about it. The next deep dive is already in the works. Until next time.